Today we are talking about money. Being self-employed is nice, but managing your finances, that's where things can get messy. And no one really talks about it. I went from getting a steady paycheck every 2 weeks from my 9 to 5 to, being my own boss and having to figure out where my money is coming from and where it's going. Like, how do you pay yourself? What about taxes? What happens when you have a slow month? It took me a while to figure out a system that works, but once I finally did, things started to feel way less stressful. So in this video, I'm sharing exactly how I handle my finances as someone who works for herself. Budgeting, saving, paying myself, taxes, all the good stuff. But quick disclaimer before we dive in, I am not a financial expert or an accountant, just a girl who's sharing what works for me as someone who's self-employed, so take everything I say here with a grain of salt, okay? The way I handle my money and taxes might look totally different from how you should handle yours because everyone's situation is unique, different incomes, locations, laws, and so much more. So I highly recommend talking to an accountant or at the very least someone knowledgeable and trustworthy about your finances before making any big decisions. I'm just sharing my personal experience to give you an idea of what self-employed finances can look like. Hopefully it helps. Let's dive in. First, let's talk about where my income actually comes from as someone who's self-employed. Because one thing I've learned, relying on just one source of income is very risky, especially when you work for yourself. Having multiple streams of income isn't just nice, it's what gives me stability and peace of mind. When you're not depending on just one thing, you don't instantly panic when one income stream suddenly slows down. So currently I have 7 income streams: selling digital products on Etsy, selling digital products outside of Etsy, Amazon influencer program, a revenue sharing program, YouTube AdSense, content creation, and my stock market investments. Alright, let's talk about something you'll have to figure out when starting your own business. Should you be a sole proprietor or set up a corporation? Don't worry, I'll keep this super simple. As a sole proprietor, you and your business are basically the same thing. You don't need to set up anything fancy. You can just start selling and report what you earn on your personal taxes. This is what most people do when they're just starting out because it's easy and there's not a lot of paperwork. But once your business starts earning a good amount of money, things change. That's when a lot of people, myself included, get advice to set up a corporation. Here's the easiest way to think about it. A corporation is like setting up a separate entity for your business. The business earns the money, but instead of it all going straight to you, you get paid a salary from the corporation. It's kind of like how you'd get paid at a regular job. One of the common reasons why people set up a corporation: taxes. When you start making more, having a corporation can help you pay less in taxes overall. At least that's what my accountant told me, and I trust him with my life when it comes to these things. So for me, I now have a corporation set up and I get paid a personal salary from the corporation. If you're just starting out, being a sole proprietor is totally fine. I started with that, but once things pick up, definitely talk to an accountant to see if a corporation makes sense for you. Having an accountant is one of those adulting things that no one really tells you about, but trust me, it is so worth having. Having someone on your side who knows their stuff to guide you makes all the difference. So let's talk about how I pay myself. When you're running your own business, all that money that comes in, that's not all spending money. It's super tempting to think of it that way, but that is not sustainable. What I do instead is I pay myself a set salary every month, just like how I used to when I had a corporate job. I pay myself semi-monthly, so it still feels like I'm getting that regular paycheck twice a month, just like how I used to back in my 9 to 5 days. The rest of the money, it stays in my business. I use it to reinvest, pay for expenses, save for taxes, and keep a buffer for those slower months, because let's be real, when you're self-employed, not every month looks the same. This system works for me because it keeps my personal spending in check and makes sure my business stays healthy. Alright, let's talk about taxes. Everyone's favorite topic, right? But seriously, when you're self-employed, you really need to stay on top of this, and I'll share how I handle mine. So here in Canada, I remit my personal taxes every month to the CRA. That's the Canada Revenue Agency, for those of you who don't know. For example, if I'm paying myself a gross salary of $1,000, I remit $200 to the government, and $800 goes to my personal bank account. But here's the thing, paying my personal taxes doesn't mean I'm off the hook at year end. By the end of the year, I still have to pay corporate taxes on what the business actually earned, and that's my net income. Basically, it works like this. The business earns money. You subtract all the expenses like salary, tools, subscriptions, and any business costs. And what's left, that's my net income, and that's what I pay corporate taxes on. That's why it's so important to keep things organized and set aside a portion of my income for taxes so I'm not caught off guard at the end of the year when it's time to pay. So yeah, taxes might not be fun, but staying on top of them is key, especially when you're self-employed. Again, I might sound like a broken record here, but when you're just starting out, I highly recommend talking to someone who knows their stuff, like an accountant, so you can set up a system that works for you. I promise it is so worth it. Okay, let's talk about budgeting and managing business expenses because surprisingly, this part is pretty chill for me. Because I sell digital products, I don't have a ton of recurring expenses, which definitely makes my life easier. So here are the expenses I have. My salary, because I pay myself, my accountant, who's basically my financial lifesaver, and a few subscriptions I use regularly, like Canva for designing, Epidemic Sound for content creation, and maybe Amazon Prime for everything else. Other than that, I occasionally spend on stuff for my home office or content creation, like a tripod here or a cute desk organizer there, but really it's not a lot. To keep things simple, I charge all of my business expenses to one business credit card. That way, all my transactions are in one place, and my accountant can balance the books without having to dig through a million accounts. I also keep separate bank accounts for my digital product income and my content creation income. It just makes sorting through transactions easier. If you're doing your own books and can't afford an accountant yet, my tip is to keep things super organized and use tools like spreadsheets or a free accounting software to track everything. And if you need a little extra help, you can actually hire affordable bookkeepers on Fiverr to handle your bookkeeping. It's a budget-friendly option that can make a big difference. Okay, now let's talk about something that no one likes to think about, but is so important when you're self-employed. Having an emergency fund. Unpredictable months will happen. When I first went full-time selling digital products on Etsy, everything was going great at first. But then around my 4th month, things got unusually slow, like crickets. Not gonna lie, it freaked me out. It was such a scary thought because I'd only just started getting used to the freedom of working for myself. Thankfully, the sales picked up eventually, but that moment was a total wake-up call for me. From then on, I made it a point to build an emergency fund in my business account. So if slow months ever come again, which they totally do, I'm not panicking about how to pay my bills. When you're self-employed, income isn't always consistent, and that's just the reality of it. And having an emergency fund, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or whatever works for you, gives you peace of mind and a safety net when things slow down. So if you're just starting out, save whatever you can, because when those unpredictable months hit, you'll be so glad you did. All right, let's get into my top financial tips when you're self-employed. First up, keep your personal and business finances separate. This is like rule number 1. This will make your life so much easier when you're sorting through transactions or doing taxes. Tip number 2 is pay yourself a set salary. Just because you're earning money doesn't mean it's all spending money. I personally pay myself semi-monthly, just like a regular paycheck, so it still feels consistent, and I leave the rest in my business account for future growth and expenses. It also keeps me in check with my personal budget because I know exactly how much I'm getting every month. That way, I can't just go off and splurge on things I don't need. Tip 3, build an emergency fund. Self-employment income can be very unpredictable, so having a safety net will save you a lot of stress during slower months. This is also where paying yourself a set salary really helps. It keeps you from burning through all your business revenue in one go and gives you that stability to manage slower months without panicking. Number 4, track your expenses. Even if you can't afford an accountant yet, get organized from the get-go. Use a spreadsheet, free accounting tools, or hire a cheap bookkeeper from Fiverr to help you out. The more on top of this you are, the less overwhelmed you'll feel when tax season hits. Tip 5, reinvest wisely. It's super important to put back some of the profits back into your business, whether that's upgrading tools, paying for subscriptions, or even outsourcing tasks. One of the best ways to reinvest is by hiring an accountant or a bookkeeper, especially if numbers aren't your thing. And let's be real, they're not mine either. So if your business is starting to bring in solid income, I highly recommend that the first thing you invest in is a good and trustworthy accountant. It'll free up your time and keep your finances in check. All right, that's a wrap on how I handle my finances as a self-employed business owner. Hopefully this gave you some ideas on how to manage your money and how to keep your business running smoothly. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and leave a comment down below on how you handle your finances. I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!